Okay, everyone. The Morrisons are here, so we can get started. They're sneaking in. Welcome to Pastor's Bible Study Holy Week version. That was, all right. Like nothing's going to be different. But you do see the Stations of the Cross around you if you want to take some time this evening or the next couple of evenings from 5 to 7. Before the services, we're going to have the sanctuary open, and so you're welcome to come. And they start here in this window, and you kind of snake your way through the sanctuary, and you end right here at the altar, at the cross where Christ is being crucified. So these are really wonderful pieces that the Crosbys made for us. And they've been kind of touched up over the years and everything, but it's really a great way to just walk through. We were thinking through how many times we've used these, and I think this is maybe the 4th time we've used it, because the first time we had gotten it all ready and set up, and then COVID hit. And so we did this goofy, the staff, we all read through them, and we videoed it, and then we played it live. I need to go back and watch that. I wonder how... There's many things that happened at the beginning of COVID that I would love to go back and watch. Like, I'm digressing totally, but Morning Watch, I went back to see the very first one. Has anybody done this? Okay, I went back to see the very first one, and I look exhausted. And I'm speaking in very low tones, and I really don't know what I'm doing, and because I'd never been on any sort of like live thing in my life. And it's just really funny to go back and watch and just see how that thing's morphed. But we're not here to talk about that. We're in Mark. We're in Mark chapter 1. So if you have your Bible, grab it. If not, just get the one in front of you in the pew. And I think what we decided was we were going to start in verse 16, right? And I said to remind me if I got off. Because we started talking about Jesus calling his first disciples there in 14. But we really focused in on the thing that he's saying, and that is, the time has now come, the kingdom of God is near, repent and believe the good news. So we did a lot of that conversation around the idea of repenting and then the idea of believing, and the difference between belief and like belief in when you don't see something and being able to believe or trust something when you do see it. And so one of the questions that actually came up was from Nancy, and that was, is it the same word for faith and belief? And so I did a little bit of research this week, and the answer is yes, it is the same word, pisteuo, and it's the same word in Hebrews that is used in Hebrews chapter 11. Now faith is being sure of what we hope for, confident in the things unseen. So Jesus is really using that same phrase here. But we spent a good bit of time talking about that last week and the importance of belief and how belief really does affect our action. That's why repentance is a piece of it. If we do believe something, it's going to change the way we act. And we show that we believe something by acting in the way it's calling us to. So I could dive into some heavy Dietrich Bonhoeffer there as well, but we won't. We're going to stick with verse 16 here and move forward. So Jesus is in Galilee. He went into Galilee, it says there in 14, and he's proclaiming the good news of God. Now here's 16 through 20. As Jesus walked beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and his brother Andrew casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. "Come, follow me," Jesus said, "and I will make you fishers of men." At once they left their nets and followed him. When he had gone a little farther, he saw James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John in a boat, preparing their nets. Without delay he called them, and they left their father Zebedee in the boat with the hired men and followed him. Okay, what are some of the things that you're noticing here? What kind of observations do you have in this small section here? Yeah, Rod? Yep. Okay. All right, I'm not going to dig. I want to put a pin in that because I want to dig into what you're saying there. But you're just making an observation, and that is you've got two sets of men here who are working for a living, and this is a job, and yet all of a sudden they just leave and follow Jesus. So I do want to put a pin in that, like what in the world just happened? Because, hang on just a second, Deanne had her hand up.
Well, along the same lines, it sounds like it all happened in 10 minutes.
Yes.
I'm going to guess it probably did.
So what's the, yeah. But what's the timing is really the question that we have there. What is the timing of these events that this really happened? Okay, I don't want to miss Kate. She had raised her hand right alongside Rod. Y'all were whispering together. Okay. Nancy, what about you? Oh, yeah, that is a really interesting observation. Two sets of brothers here. All four fishermen. Let's name them. Let's just say their names. Who's the first set of brothers? Simon and Andrew. Oh, you said Peter. You were interpreting. I'm just kidding. Simon and Andrew. And then also who? James and John. And we're given another detail about them. What is that detail? The sons of Zebedee. We're going to put a pin in that as well. Okay, so you're noticing that Zebedee has hired help, meaning there's other hired men there who they left with their father Zebedee. So I'm going to turn that into an observation, and that is, I wonder if he was a man of means. Yes. Yeah, great question, Diane. Well, so if you would look in the Greek, the actual grammar is focused on the subject, which is James and John, and they're the ones that are leaving. If that makes sense, yeah. Dave?
He's recruiting, as Rod said, from working men. He's not in the
Okay.
job.
Okay, so it's the same observation but a different angle, because I think Rod is coming to it on the fact of they're leaving their job, and you're coming to it for that observation on the types of men that he is recruiting here, and that is they're not people who are already in some sort of religious job. Okay, great observation. These are working class people. Really good observation. What else are we noticing? Oh, thank you, Meredith. Okay. Yeah, he's very focused on these four men, isn't he? There are other people around, we know that, and he doesn't seem to be asking them to come. What's up with that? Okay. What else? Oh, that's a good question. That's a good question. I wonder if there are entrepreneurs back in first century Rome. I'm sure there would have been, yeah. That's a good question. What else? Yeah, Kevin. Why Galilee? So why is Jesus there in Galilee? That's a great question. Yeah, really good question. Pam or Jerry? They were also because of the dad? Yeah, they're leaving their family in the sense of their dad, yeah. Yeah, and honestly, back in that day, you didn't get married and leave your family. Your life is lived in a much more tight-knit community with your family than yeah. So they're even leaving their family, yeah. We're just sort of stacking up the stakes, aren't we, here in the observations? Stacking up the reasons that you would not go, or maybe the reasons why this seems to be a really courageous thing. Keith?
He also tells him what he's wanting. He tells him to follow him. He will make them fishermen.
Okay. Yeah, he's giving them clarity in their call. He does it in a little bit of a riddle type of way. But yes, he makes this statement to them, especially to Simon and to Andrew. Come with me, follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. Yeah. Pam? He doesn't always speak in riddles, but he likes to speak in riddles, doesn't he? Or at least with questions. Yeah.
My interpretation says, I will send you out to fish for people. And
Okay.
it made me smile. 'Cause
What?
it wasn't that fisher of men kind of thing.
Ah,
It was really pretty straightforward. You're going to fish for people.
you're going to fish for people. What version do you have? You have NIV? I've got NIV, but I have the 1984 NIV. So just push pause on our conversation tonight. Okay. This is a great example of changes that are made to interpretations. So I have the NIV that was the first NIV that was created, and that was in 1984. And then they made an adjustment in the year 2000. Some of it was to take language that needed to be more inclusive. So sometimes when, like the Proverbs is a great example, they say him and he a lot, but they don't just mean men. They mean all people. And so instead of just saying like, I'm going to make you fishers of men, then they're going to say fishers of people. And the Greek language lends itself to that sort of inclusion, but we can get caught in, especially King James level stuff here, right? And so a lot of times some of these versions that we have will have an update, and you'll notice that sometimes even like the NRSV, it's had multiple updates, and so you could even have the same version but a little bit of a different tweak. And of course, people always have strong opinions about whether they like the update or not, but it's a helpful tool. It's a helpful thing to see, and this was just a good moment for that tonight. You can even just see the importance of choosing some interpretations, because while many of them are very safe, you do get a different perspective by the different way that it's interpreted. And so we're even seeing that within the same interpretation, just an update tonight. Fishers of people. You're going to fish, what does it say? Fish for people. It does almost bring a different clarity to it, doesn't it? Yeah. Okay. Any other observations before we move forward? Yeah, Shane. Say that one more time.
Both sets of brothers are doing something with their nets.
Okay, go a little deeper into that. What do you mean by that? Like they're actually laying them down, or?
Casting them out, and the other two are mending.
Okay. They're both, so at both moments, Jesus comes upon them and they have their nets in their hands. Ooh, what an interesting observation. That's cool. I don't know. Yeah, that's interesting observation. I mean, that really gets you into the story, doesn't it? Wow. Thanks for that. What else? The timing. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I guess one of the things we can say here is that this is the first thing that he does after he comes out of the temptation. Yeah. Jerry, what were you going to say?
It's Mark, he does we hear that the disciples follow him, but in this particular story, it puts a little more emphasis on it. It makes you think the Lord just dropped the net and walked away.
Okay, so you're wondering maybe if the timing of it, or the felt timing of it, like this is just immediate walking away, is a little part of Mark's.
They didn't have any need to think it over and sleep on it.
Sure. They leave immediately, yeah.
The word Mark uses kind of tells us that in the story.
Yeah, when I got the phone call, you're going to move. We want to move you to First Methodist in Weatherford. Okay. No, listen. So then I said where? No. I said, oh, okay. I said, okay, I need to visit with Mary Catherine. When do I need to call you back? If you can call us tomorrow, that would be great. You want me to move my whole family to a place out in the middle of nowhere? I'm just kidding. And I have a day, and it was like, yeah. They don't have the luxury of even a full day, it seems, yeah. Diane, you were going to say something? Ah. Ooh, that's interesting. Now you're dipping, yeah. Yeah, we're dipping in between stories here, but here's a good observation. The temptation in the wilderness and the Sea of Galilee are very far from each other. So that sort of timing is really kind of interesting too, yeah. Pam? Oh, great question. Let's use that as a launching point. John's arrest, honestly, I'm sure there is a scholar who knows where that is. Mark is not specific on where that is. You could guess that in the Jerusalem region is probably near where he was arrested, because you're talking about King Herod being the one who imprisons him and also gets his head on a platter during a banquet, just reading in other stories. So you can assume he's at least in that region, at least he's moved there. But much of his ministry, we know, was along the Jordan River and primarily probably in the Judean wilderness, okay? But one of the things that we looked at for a brief moment last week was this statement in verse 14 that it was after John was put in prison that Jesus launches himself into ministry. So if Jesus' baptism by John and then temptation in the wilderness, if those things are sort of the, what was the word we used for that last week? Not ordination, but his commissioning into ministry. If those are the moments of commissioning for ministry, Jesus is now prepared to begin his ministry. We did note, though, there's a difference between his, and I think I mentioned this in my sermon on Sunday, either that or it's in my notes for the sermon to come. I'm trying to remember. I'm lost in sermon notes right now because I'm preaching a lot this next couple weeks. Jesus, there's a difference between his private ministry and what then becomes his public ministry. Remember? And we will see it in... we'll see it in the next section. Don't tell anyone who I am. It's this idea, right? So Jesus' launch into ministry seems to be connected to John's arrest. He's picking up the baton of preaching the kingdom of heaven, but he's doing it with different unction, different spiritual power. And that is the fact that he is the Son of God. Now, we move then into this next section where he's beginning to call his disciples, and there's a number of things we mentioned, but I want to go directly back to Rod, because Rod, I want you to go a little deeper into your initial observation. These are men who are working, and especially in a patriarchal culture where they are the primary breadwinners or fish winners for their families. And I mean, they are bringing money and providing for their family. So go a little deeper into what you're observing with that.
Along those lines also, they're both using nets. Now think about that. When you go fishing, you got a rod and reel, right? How many fish you get? You catch one
Sure.
at a time.
Yeah.
They're catching how many at a time?
Yeah.
What is Jesus doing? He's not catching one person at a time and then putting for the rest of the day. He's going to be casting a net to catch hundreds and thousands.
Boy, that'll preach, Rod Lindy. Did you guys hear what he said? So Rod's saying, look, when these guys are fishing with nets, they're not fishing with rods and reels. They're catching more fish than just one at a time. And when Jesus is going to catch people, he's not going with a rod and reel, he's going with a net. You know, also in Matthew 13, we've been reading that on Morning Watch, and did you hear today? The kingdom of heaven is like a net that went into the sea and gathered up all of the fish. Dadgum, Rod Lindy. Good stuff. Go a little deeper, though, into, well, I'll just take it from here. All right, so then there's these men, right? And they're working, and they are putting food on the table for their families, and they have walked away from those jobs that put food on the table. That requires trust, and it requires a calling. That's a great question, yeah. Yeah, how do what do their families think? Now, I would tell you this. The gospel writers never tell us what their families think. And I think part of that is that's a very 21st century thing to think, to wonder. Right? I mean, in most places, if the man says we're doing this, we're doing it. And no one cares what you think or not. And that's the reality of a patriarchal culture. And I'm sure there were plenty of patriarchs that wanted to know what their spouses thought, you know? But that was not the thing that everyone wondered about. What does his wife think? That's a very 20th, 21st century thing to think. But it's a good one to wonder, because you do wonder. Do they know who Jesus is? Are they as convinced? You know, the Chosen tries to deal with this a little bit. Peter's wife comes into the conversation a lot in that story, and it's fascinating because we really actually never hear from her in the Gospels. Yeah. But the fact is, they followed this man, okay? And Dave, remind me what your point was. You were coming from the side of...
Well, he wasn't recruiting people that were at...
Okay, yeah.
They weren't already obviously studying...
Yes.
Religious leaders.
That's right. So he's also not pulling in people who are waiting in line to become rabbis. So let me just give you a little bit of a brief history as to how this would work in the days of those types of rabbis. Walking around the community would be a rabbi. And actually, this is still the case in Israel today, where the rabbi is sort of the leader of a community of people. Like in a neighborhood, there is a specific rabbi that runs the neighborhood. And they have all sorts of authority and power. Just watch Fiddler on the Roof, and you'll get a little bit of this, right? The rabbi then wants to identify people to be his disciples. That's not a term that is specific to Jesus. Disciples comes from the Greek word didaskalos, which just means one who is learning, a student. And so if you're someone who is a disciple, you get called by a rabbi to come follow him, what that's saying is you have been invited into the person with all of the authority in your community to learn from him, to be elevated into that role someday, so that the rabbi walks around with an air about him. Sometimes it can even be in humility, but they know who they are. They know their authority. They don't walk around waiting for people, opening doors for people. They walk around and people open doors for them without them even asking. It's that kind of thing. And so if I was to say, Dave, follow me, and I'm a rabbi, and you know I'm a rabbi, your thought is, oh my goodness, I have been asked to join the upper echelons. And there's a lot of rabbis. And all of the rabbis have a bit of a pecking order as well. Okay, so if you want to be chief priest someday, you're going to study under the rabbis who have sort of the line to be chief priest, You want to be a top dog lawyer in the greatest firms in New York City, you go to Harvard University. So some people are going to study at Harvard. Some people are going to study under Nicodemus. Some people are going to study under another rabbi that's sort of a no-name, but they're going to do this wonderful work of teaching the Torah and calling people into holiness. And that's so even that rabbi, he's limited in who he can invite, right? So the TCUs, they can only get the bottom feeders. You know, I'm just kidding. You have a pecking order, right? So you have some rabbis that are not going to be elevated to the place of chief priest or even elders, you know? And so they're really the top dog disciples, they're waiting to be asked by the top dog rabbis. Okay, this is the kind of way it's going. So if you're sort of someone who's come out of Hebrew day school and Torah school, and you are sort of at the bottom of your class in essence, like you haven't shown that you're going to be the one that's elevated to the top, and someone says to you, a rabbi says to you, follow me, you're like, whoa, yes, I'll follow you now. There is no decision that needs to be made. Ray Vander Laan makes this point, and he actually has a video series called In the Dust of the Rabbi. And it's a really, really good one, and it's really helpful. And he makes this same point. And he's saying, anyone who is a Jewish boy or man would be honored to be invited to follow a rabbi, to be a disciple of a rabbi. Now, I want to show you something. Jesus has moved into the Galilean region before he begins calling his disciples. And see what he's done there? He has already begun to proclaim the good news of God. He's already taken up the mantle of John the Baptist. People know him. They know he's a rabbi. He's taken on that role. So in that, when he calls these fishermen, and they hear him say, follow me, and he means as a disciple, they're going to go. Now, I have no idea how long there was in between these two things, but Mark is not the only one making it seem like they literally dropped their nets and left. And I honestly do believe, I actually am of the belief, they literally dropped their nets and they followed Jesus. Now, I don't think that was like, get in the van and you'll never see your parents again. I don't think it was like that. Or you'll never see. I think it was like, come with me and leave this life that you've been in. And so get your things in order. And so you lay down your nets and you go. Ray Vander Laan uses this phrase, in the dust of the rabbi, that you're following so close to your rabbi. Everything he does, everybody, everywhere he goes, everything he talks about, all that he's doing, you're learning from him. And so you're covered in the dust of your rabbi because you're following so closely behind him. And so his point is, we need to be covered in the dust of Jesus. All of that being said, that is a point that was made in my life a long time ago, and it has changed the way I've really read this moment in this calling, because I think that what they're hearing, and this is to Dave's point, they were left out. Every boy goes to Torah school in childhood. Every child is taught these things. But there's a moment where you don't make the cut. And so, or there's a moment where your family can't afford for you to continue doing that. There's all sorts of social, cultural, educational reasons as to why someone would not be elevated. Some of that's like country club level stuff, So these are the ones who they're working with stinky fish. They're not shepherds, but they're fishermen. They've been left out of this hierarchical ladder. And so for Jesus to come to them, it's a statement on who he's really seeking, what his kingdom is really like. And it says to them in a way that they've never heard in their life, I want you to join me as a disciple. I mean, can you just put yourself into that? And you start to recognize how desperate they are to hear this. It's pretty powerful to think about it that way. Yeah. Yes. I appreciate you saying that. That's exactly right. Zebedee, and they do portray this well in The Chosen, he is very happy for them to be called. He's honored. My sons have been asked to be a disciple of the rabbi. It certainly is an honor. And I would guess that it would be the same for families. This is an honor-shame culture. So in an honor-shame culture, especially within a family unit, what you do, anything you say, any way you react to people, either brings honor on the family or shame on the family. And so for you to be elevated into this role, you've brought honor to the family. And everyone's going to be happy about that. Yeah, and I think this is a little bit of Meredith's observation here, and Allison's making the point of certainly we can trust that Jesus, in his divine knowledge, understands who needs to be called and who doesn't. He really has an understanding of who is going to go. Now, you've heard me say this before, but I'll say it again. This is the second time it's come up in conversation today. The number one rule of discipleship is that you be teachable. Be teachable. Whether that's you wanting to grow in your own discipleship or that's you wanting to disciple someone else, the number one rule is teachability. If someone is not teachable, how can they be a disciple? That's a part of the very word. And so for Jesus to know who they are. Now, the question I would have is, how long did he know who they were? The Chosen sort of portrays it as they've all been kind of moving in the same community for a while. We have no idea how deeply he knows who they are and their character traits and all those kinds of things. But he knows them, and he's calling them, and they're saying yes, and they're following. And so, yeah, you're seeing the gamut of this with these people who are working, the families that they're leaving. It's a big moment in their life. So, Sandra, were you going to say something?
Yeah.
You were you were reluctant. Oh, we're in interpretation mode, so you just go at it. Sure, yeah. Yeah, of course. No, that's really helpful. Yes. Okay. There's the miraculous moment. Yeah. That's right. He has other disciples. Yep. Yep. Oh, you mean in the sense of the disciples of John? Andrew's one of those. The disciples of John they would know about Jesus from John himself, and then they also have already done this work of trying to follow after someone. John's just a little different. He's not really seen as a rabbi, more of a prophet. But yeah, the calling, there is more context to it, a little bit more breadth to it than just Jesus walked up to random people. Yeah. Yeah, who did? Andrew did or John did? Yeah, John the Baptist calls him the Lamb of God. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting, were they around when he was baptized? We're not really given that detail, but yeah, that would be a cool, helpful thing. Did they hear the voice? I think it was a crack of thunder is the way everyone, but yeah, what happened in that moment? Were they, at least Andrew, was he there? Was he aware? How would that change their perspective of following him? regardless, and this is a really helpful thing now, we do this a lot. We say, okay, well, these are all things that are helpful for us in trying to build the story in our head, but Mark's not interested in these details. And the question we always have to ask is, then why is Mark not interested in these details? And it's because Mark's not interested in lingering here. Mark wants to move forward by saying, the only thing he's really interested in showing is that Jesus is moving forward in his ministry, and his initial thing is preaching, and his second thing is to start calling people to follow him. And he's now going to build a little bit of what this looks like over these next few chapters. We're going to have to go faster in our other every week, because these are small sections, but they're so rich, aren't they? Also, you guys have gotten really, really good at observation. And these were wonderful observations today in this. Nancy, were you going to say something? Sure. Okay, geographic question. Oh, that was another point that we'll come back to. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Okay, good question. Okay, great question. So Nancy's asking a couple questions, and I need to dip back into Diane's observation here, which it's just going to remain an observation, everyone, because there's no interpretation of this, just an observation. But so let's just start with Diane's. We do know that he begins his ministry up in Capernaum, and we know that from the other Gospels. Capernaum is the spot, and that's actually up in the northern part of the Sea of Galilee. Could we say it's on the northernmost tip of Sea of Galilee? Maybe it's a little further west? Northwest, okay. So he certainly, though, is at the top of the Sea of Galilee, and Capernaum is where that would have happened, all right? And so the Sea of Galilee is not a great lake. It's not massive like that. It's also not Lake Weatherford. You know, what would you, calling it a lake felt a little like a stretch. It's less than 10 miles wide. From the spot where our hotel was, you could see basically the entire water, okay? So it's not massive, but it's still, when you're talking about being on foot, it's a long way to get up there to Capernaum. And so the time it would take him to get from the wilderness up to the area of Capernaum, you're talking about a good march, and it would have taken him a long period of time, okay? So they didn't have a bus like we did. It's going to take a while. So you can just put that in your mind, that movement from him in the second section there, 9 through 13, to this, what's happening in 14, those are many days. Okay. Secondly, the question is, so the Jordan River, if you can look at a map, you've got the Sea of Galilee. I'm going backwards, okay? So your perspective is hopefully the right perspective. The Sea of Galilee is here, and the Jordan River comes off of the south end of it and snakes its way a little bit southeast and then lands in the Dead Sea, which is huge. It is massive. That Jordan River that's there, we don't know exactly where John was baptizing there, but we do know a probable location, and they actually have some churches set up there. And the reason why they think it's a probable location is it seems that there were some roads and things there, and there's multiple events that seem to have happened in that similar spot. Okay? So you have the Israelites the Hebrews crossing over the Jordan into the land of milk and honey around that spot. You have Naaman, who came to be healed of his leprosy, probably dipped into the water near that spot. You have Elijah and Elisha crossing over as Elijah is being taken up into heaven with the chariots of fire. That seems to have happened around that spot. And we also seem to believe that John was baptizing in that same area. That would make sense that all of these things happened in a similar area because it's a holy place. And so that is probably, if you looked at your map and you saw Jericho and you go straight east to the Jordan River, that's about where that spot is. So what is that, halfway between the Sea of Galilee and the Dead Sea, or maybe a little further? Closer to the Dead Sea. Yeah, so if you're just trying to process maybe where he would have been, it probably would have been right there. Now, the place where people go and get baptized in this exciting touristy way, which we did, and it was a very powerful moment, it's up close to the southern part of the Sea of Galilee. It's a place called Yardenit. 50 miles, yeah. That's kind of where you're located, if that's helpful for you. Yeah. Jesus has traveled a long way, and he's in a different, really, you got to realize there's different cultures in all of these places. So he's gone up and he's now residing in this place called Capernaum. And now, over these next few weeks, we're going to read these sections where he is going about his initial work of ministry there in the city of Capernaum. And it's kind of I'll try to remember to bring pictures next time just to see a couple of places, because next week, hopefully, we will go to the place where he heals, he heals Peter's mother-in-law. And we got to see what they think is that house. So, kind of cool. All right, any final thoughts or any observations that were really important that I just totally whiffed on or missed? That's right. Yeah, he's offering them certainly a career change. Most rabbis would have provisions, mostly given to them whenever they go somewhere. Yes, please stay here. Have this food. We'll feed you. You don't really need a lot of money if you're a rabbi, probably. And then what does Jesus say? There's no place to lay your head when you follow me. It's a different type of rabbi. And he's beginning to show that stuff even with the people he's choosing as his disciples. Final thing is you just have to wonder what the other rabbis are thinking about him, we will see later as the Gospels progress, obviously they're threatened by him because of the way he's teaching. In the next section, let me see if I can find it. In the next section in verse 22, he taught them as one who had authority, not as the teachers of the law. When someone walks in, now there's a difference between authority because of position and authority because of unction. Two different things. And when someone walks in the room, sometimes people lean on their authority by position to get things done. And others lean on the authority that is given to them, handed to them because of their character, because of their sometimes charisma, whatever it may be. And they're beginning to see that. That's noticeable. And so it would cause some angst. Sure. That's exactly right. Yeah. Yeah, Jesus' interest is not just blowing everything up. In fact, he says it in the Sermon on the Mount. I have not come to abolish the law, but to fulfill it. So his idea of being a rabbi is to say, I'm not here to change all of this. I'm going to be a rabbi, but I'm not going to be a rabbi who is a rabbi for my own welfare. I'm not going to call disciples just because they can give me more authority. I'm going to be a rabbi who's going to call people who are really going to make a difference, who are teachable. And I'm going to be a type of rabbi that actually teaches, fulfills the law of Moses. He is not blowing up Judaism. He's fulfilling Judaism. And that's a really, really important point because at the least, it helps us honor our Jewish brothers and sisters and the Old Testament. At the greatest, it keeps us from defaulting into anti-Semitism, And so, absolutely, he is very much a Jew, wants to be a Jew, wants to do the things that Jewish rabbis do. He just does it in a way that has more power, more authority, Shane?
In the Bible and the scriptures, it talks about there's a lot of competition between disciples. Always fighting.
There seems to be arguments among the disciples, yeah.
I can only imagine if Peter, Simon, and Andrew follow Jesus, they come along, he calls James and John,
Yeah.
and they're saying, Simon, Andrew, they've probably been competing officially.
Yeah, sure. That is an interesting dynamic to think through is what is their relationship like? Are Simon and Andrew and James and John, have they been in competition as fishermen? Was there some sort of a brotherhood that was there, or was there like intensity? And then, so what is that like now all of a sudden you're both following Jesus? I do think, and this is the final thing, we got to go. I do think that in The Chosen, they do portray some interesting things of like, there's moments where they're like, what are we even doing? What are we even doing here? Who knows what it was really like, but it's such, I think one of the reasons why we've spent so much time tonight, and why we're able to make such good observations, is that we want to be the disciples, don't we? We want to be the disciples. We want to follow Jesus. We want to be called by him. And the beauty is, he has called you. He has said to you, follow me. That's a wonderful thing. And so it is very intriguing for us to know, gosh, what does our life need to look like? How should we respond? And I think that's a wonderful thing for us to do. Tomorrow we're going to have communion during Maundy Thursday, and one of the things I'll tell you tomorrow, so just you're going to get a little preview. But one of the things, one of the beauties of communion, the Lord's Supper, we get to do one of the things that Jesus did. Like he did that, and we get to do the same thing. How cool is that? There's a lot that seems to be there's such a chasm because of time and culture, and we get to take the bread and the cup just like he did. That's kind of a neat thing, Okay, well let me pray and then we'll close. Lord, it's really interesting for us to look at this, and we don't want to just let it be interesting because of knowledge. We want it to be interesting because of the tug on our hearts. That how do we respond to your call? Do we lay down our nets? Do we go? Are we honored? Lord, I'm just going to pray tonight that everyone who's here, if we have not heard your voice saying, follow me, maybe at some point this evening you'll give us that calling. Maybe there's someone here tonight who needs to hear the reality that you have actually called them. And would you give them the courage to say the same thing, to do the same thing, to lay down their nets and follow you? We pray all of these things in your holy name. Amen. Okay, fried chicken, everybody.